it is a hat because my hair is pretty bad right now. So
Yeah, it doesn't look
hat.
that bad. I made a similar choice. Oh,
Looks
actually,
good.
hey, thank you.
Your hair looks actually pretty decent.
Thanks. I talked about this last week, but almost every day I talk to Ashley and I say, should I shave my head? She says, just wait one more day. And it's been like a couple weeks of that.
Your hair's looking good, Willie.
Thank you. I might shave it tomorrow. Who knows? Anyway, this is the second week in a row I've talked about that. I've talked about haircuts. But we're not here to talk about haircuts. We're here to talk about the weekend message that you gave, Pastor Brandon, about the cost of following Jesus, that it's free, monetary, but that it costs something in our life. You talked a lot about Simon Peter, and yeah, just the cost that it takes, not money or stuff, but you have to give up attention and energy and die to ourselves, pick up our own cross to say, not my will, but yours, God. So, Pastor Brandon, as I was listening, Cameron was writing the questions, and I was actually super curious because I actually don't know this about you. What was the cost of following Jesus for you in that? What was like the alternate career choice? Like, what were you going to do?
So it's kind of funny because much like Ryan Sue's testimony that we saw this weekend, I thought about law. My dad was in law, so took a law class, thought it was fun, but didn't really see a future in it. I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. I thought about politics, teaching, business, news anchoring, like all kinds of stuff. But it wasn't like, unlike Ryan's testimony, I didn't have I'm going to do this. I know Jesus calls me this way. I was actually very like, I don't know what to do with my life. And when I volunteered in ministry, especially youth ministry, and saw high schoolers come to know Jesus, I thought this is the best thing ever because you're making an eternal difference in someone's life. And volunteering even more, seeing people just acknowledge and encourage the different gifts coming out in my life, I felt like ministry really was like a good area for me to plug into. So for me, the cost wasn't necessarily a career choice, although there's opportunity costs inherent in all of that, right? Saying yes to ministry means saying no to all these other career fields. I think for me, the cost of following Jesus, when it comes to my whole life, was the life that I could have been living had I not done other things. So whether it's career, whether it's relationships, whether it's money, whether it's when I was single, the person that I wanted to date. I remember in my early 20s, I was kind of talking to this one girl and I just thought she was the most amazing thing in the world. She could care less about Jesus, but we liked each other. And I was trying to spend more time with her and bring her to church. And I just knew that it wasn't what God wanted me to do. But I thought, I'm just going to do it anyway. And everything came to a head for me when I realized that I was so much more focused on what she thought about me and me spending time with her than me actually focusing on what God was saying to me. And that was a cost of saying no to this. So it goes back to almost similar to what Pastor Owen said last week about Jesus telling Simon Peter, do you love me more than these? And the answer being, yes, Lord. So whether it was relationships or career choices or financial security and comfort and all these other things. But the amazing thing is when we say yes to Jesus and we give up our hopes and our dreams and all these things, it's funny how God brings certain things back around. Obviously not everything, but it's almost like God is saying, are you willing to give me your career future or your love interest or your financial comfort? Or are you willing to give these things to me? When we finally sacrifice it, it's like God takes that and says, okay, I'm going to give this part back to you. Now take care of it because it belongs to me. I'm letting you use it. And I see that now.
I like the idea of like, it, instead of like giving up my hopes and dreams, it's God asking like, do you trust me more than you trust your own hopes and dreams? You know, I could really see you being like one of those early morning news people. Or they don't really do the news, but they just kind of like hang out in front of a camera.
So I'm not fit to do the news, but I can hang out. I'll take it. Call Billy V. He knows.
I mean, all you got to do is like wear an Aloha shirt and show up at 5 a.m.
Ooh, okay, never mind. I'm out.
Yeah, that's pretty rough. I've never watched a single episode because I'm never awake in time. But yeah, I like that idea of like, do you trust God with your hopes and your career and everything? We had the Alive this past Friday, which was an incredible time. And we were talking about the cost that it takes to follow Jesus, and how just as you said, that when you say yes to Jesus, you're kind of saying no to everything else. Um, and so we were talking, and I was talking with this middle schooler, and he asked, "Well, can't you follow Jesus and something else? Because there are like famous Christians, like they like are musicians." And then everyone around the circle started trying to like list every Christian musician they could think of, and it was just like, this is fun. But it was cool because like we don't have to like, okay, I'm gonna become a monk and like go into a monastery for the rest of my life. But if we use the dreams and trust God with our passions and everything, then He can turn it into something that's used for God's kingdom, His glory. You know?
Yeah. And I think that's the heart of it really is, am I building my kingdom or am I building God's kingdom? And
Yeah,
it's a question of
exactly.
motivations, and who really knows but you and God. And sometimes it leaks out to the surface where it's obvious this person is all about themselves, right?
Mm,
Versus trying to do things for the glory of God. And I think that's the part where we have to be really mindful of is, am I doing this for God's glory under the covering of God's glory, but really I'm doing this for myself, you
mm,
know?
mm-hmm.
So even with the idea like famous Christians or famous people or even wealthy people, can you be a follower of Jesus and be wealthy? Um, you look at the story of the rich young ruler where Jesus says, "One thing you lack, sell everything, give it all to the poor, and come follow me." Right? It's almost like Jesus was putting his finger on this person's area of his life that was not submitted to him. Because
Yeah,
as we said on the weekend, it's not like Jesus wants you to sell everything right now and every single follower of Jesus has to be poor, right? Because when you have income and you have wealth, the question more is, are you generous with it to sow back into the kingdom of God as you enjoy some comforts in this world, you know? And I
yeah.
know a lot of
I think
Christians that
that
are wealthy that really do that.
yeah, exactly. I think that it's kind of, and I could be completely off base. But I think it was more of a question of the heart, and to like put it into today's terms, it could be like, delete your TikTok with 1 million followers and follow me. Like, give up the thing that you value the most and follow me. Um, Man, people on TikTok have so many followers. This is besides the point, but it's crazy. Anyway,
Yeah. I know I'm old when I'm like, meh.
they make like a 10-second video and they get like 30 million views. Just like, what is going on? That's besides the point. There are those things that we hold on to, and that we have the tendency to put above God, just because I don't know. It's like the way that we're wired, family of origin things, history, the past that we've gone through, the struggles that we have. We all have those things that we can often put in front of God and put before God. And I think that's what God asks us to give up the most.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you look at the lives that we used to live and that we've come from, and a lot of times our shortcomings, our brokenness is rooted in this place of trying to find significance or comfort or safety. And it's like God wants to be that for us instead.
Mm,
So when Jesus says, if you're going to come after me, pick up your cross daily and follow me. It's like saying, say no to you and your wants and the way that you would live your life apart from the Lord, and instead be willing to pick up how He would want to do that. So
mm,
here's a easy example. On the large scale with career and everything, absolutely true. On the micro scale, just on everyday interactions with people, there's a way that I would rather respond to situations, whether it's in the office or at home with my wife. Take my wife. So Kara and I will get into arguments sometimes. And sometimes I just want to tell her certain things in certain ways that is just because that's what I want to do. But I know that if Jesus were, he wouldn't talk to her like that. And whether
mm.
it's anger, frustration, irritation, I'm going to talk to her the way that I want to talk to her. And picking up my cross, a small example of that is saying, okay, wait, I got to die to that in myself because that's not what God wants me to do. And instead, treat her with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. And that's the last thing I want to do because I feel a certain way. So
Yeah.
I think in situations like that, it's, do you want to act on your feelings and do what you want? Or are you willing to say, no, it's not what I want. God, help me to do and live the way that you would want me to do and live.
It can almost feel like those smaller moments are sometimes more difficult. Um, because they're less obvious, I feel. Because like work, career, all this stuff, that's like the big like boulders in someone's life where it's like, okay, I gotta make a choice. Like it's either this or that. But in those little moments where you're like frustrated at your spouse or a sibling or a coworker, and those like little moments to decide, okay, I'm going to die to myself. I'm going to respond with mercy, with grace, with love, like Jesus would. Um, those are more difficult. So I feel like sometimes they even have more impact. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're right. Um, I don't know if it's harder, but they definitely have unique areas where it becomes difficult. The bigger career choices of I'm not going to follow this path because I know God wants me to go this way, as we heard like in Ryan's testimony. Like that's definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Um, and other things like that. Like if you're single, who am I going to date? Or is this person, this the person that God would want me to marry? Like, how do you know that? But do you see godly character in this person? Do you see them prioritizing values of the kingdom of God in your life? Do they bring out God's best in you? Things like that. Or are you willing to go the other way and say, no, I'm going to do what I want. Forget all that stuff. I don't care. So those are the bigger issues, right? Career, marriage, family, where am I going to live, all these other things. But I think you're also right that the smaller issues have equal difficulty in a sense, because while the
Yeah.
big rocks are big, the smaller ones are more numerous, right? So just
And
the
you can,
sheer quantity of these decisions and interactions are tough.
it's easier to just like sail over them. I don't think they're more difficult in the sense of like they hold necessarily the same weight, but like they're more difficult because you can miss one without noticing. Like
Yeah.
there's so many times where like I'll be in an argument with someone or like I'm irritated at someone and then like it just hits me like the next day or something. I'm like, oh, I messed up. Like I could have been way more loving, way more forgiving, but I didn't even realize it because I was so caught up in like my own emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. And that happens to all of us, like when we see it that way. So I don't know. I think in the message I referenced Pastor Kyle Idleman's book, Not a Fan. And that concept of am I a fan of Jesus or am I a follower of Jesus is really challenging because, when it comes to being a fan of Jesus, I like Jesus. Seems like a nice guy. I want to be more like him. It's kind of nice. But to follow him is to actually say, no, I really actually want to be more like him to the point where I'll be less like myself and more like him. And a lot of times the message nowadays is just be yourself. And it's a good message. We don't want to copy other people, right? We don't want to compare ourselves to others around us. But rather, when we say, I want to be more like Jesus, we become followers of Jesus. So we start patterning our lives after the way that he would treat and live and deal with people. So, this idea of being a fan is so easy to take on
Mm,
because as a fan, it doesn't cost us much to like something, right? But if we're actually going to follow Jesus, as I mentioned, it's more than just clicking the follow button on social media, but rather like on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever it is. But it's saying, okay, I'm actually going to go after this guy. Like I want to be more like him, where his values become my values, and I think that's
yeah.
a lot harder.
The word follow has been reduced to like such a passive act. But back in Jesus's time, it was like how someone trained you. Like you
Mm,
referenced this in the message, but there's a pastor that calls it being apprenticed to Jesus, in the same way that like back in the day you would be like a blacksmith apprentice and you would go and like live at the blacksmith's house and like learn all the ins and outs of the trade. Back in Jesus's day, there were different rabbis that would go around and pick people and say, "Hey, follow me." And that would be like, "Hey, you got accepted into my university. You're gonna come like live with me and learn everything about like the teachings that I give and everything." And so Jesus saying, "Follow me," wasn't just let's catch up every once in a while over a cup of coffee, but it was, "Hey, you're gonna make your whole life about learning how to be like me." And I think that a lot of us have lost that. There's a lot of like compartmentalization of following Jesus, where it's certain days or with certain people instead of an entire life heavy decision, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's totally true. And you look at these examples of people where Jesus calls them, and they leave everything and follow him. And I like that example really about, you've been accepted into my university. Like, I'm choosing you to be a part of this. And it's almost no wonder that, Peter and Matthew, Levi would get up from their booths or their boats and leave it and say, this is worth it. I got to follow him.
Yeah. That's part of the reason that I love youth ministry, man. Like you and Ryan this past week, shout out to Ryan. He's an incredible youth leader.
Yeah, he did awesome.
But there's something about youth ministry where there are those moments where they get it,
Yeah.
And like you're at camp day 3 and you're both exhausted. One of you broke a toe and like you've been eating shoyu chicken for every meal, and you're just like, you haven't had a good shower in 3 days. You're both disgusting, but you're just like, man, I just get it. Like I get who Jesus is and how like, it reminds me of Simon, the first time that Jesus met him and he realized like, oh no, this is Jesus. And he like falls to his knees and he's like, dude, what are you doing here? Get away from me because I'm so messed up. And Jesus says, don't be afraid. Come with me. And I feel like those are the moments that you get in youth ministry, not just for the kids, but also for me. There's so many times where I see that and it reminds me, it's like, man, that's what it's about. So if you want to volunteer in youth, hit me up.
No, I think it's a great place where you see, lives making commitments to Christ. And, possibly it's because teenagers are open to what God has for them. Whereas in adulthood, we get really stuck in our routines and our commitments financially or relationally or whatever it is. But yeah, I agree. Like youth ministry is a great place to see people choose to follow Jesus. And that's a point of emphasis, is that you have to choose to follow. Like no one can force you to choose that. No one can force you to follow Christ. If you grew up going to church, but you never decided that Jesus was worth becoming like, then you like Jesus, but you're not following Jesus. You're religious, but you might say I'm spiritual, but not religious. Hey, whatever you call it, spiritual, religious, doesn't matter. The question is, are you trying to be more like Jesus? Like, are you willing to examine your life and say, okay, I'm either going to be more like Christ or not? Like, and it's not even like portions of my life. It's your whole life,
Yeah.
So here's a question as we finish the message. It was, are you more content to sit in our comforts, or are you being challenged toward his calling? And I think that's a continual challenge point for every believer, no matter how long you've been walking with Jesus, is, hey, we can make life comfortable. We can choose to not listen to what God is saying to us and close our ears to the things where God is challenging the way that we live, right? Our values, our words, our thoughts, our relationships. Or we can choose to allow God to speak to those things that we have to make changes. Looks like this whole series is changed by Jesus. See, when our lives are really transformed by Jesus and we heed the call and we follow him, we start being changed by him in the process, and then we live like him wherever we go. And that's the idea of this series that we're doing at the church at this time, is how do we see people living more like Christ authentically in the lives that they live?
I like that. And being themselves in the way that God made them to be, but doing it like Jesus, which is kind of this weird interplay. That's really good. You referenced this near the end of the message, and I just finished this book today that was talking about faith as long obedience to Jesus in the same direction. So it was talking about how following someone on Instagram is you tap a button and it's done. But following Jesus is like a lifelong learning process. But it's not as easy, air quotes, as it was for someone like Matthew or Simon, where they could literally just be like, oh, Jesus is over there. I'm going to go over there. So what are the practices in our own lives where we can follow Jesus day to day, small decisions, big decisions, things like that?
Well, I think to actually choose to follow Jesus, like practical things that we can do is to examine our hearts and motivations. Like, is this what I really should be doing? Who is this honoring? Who is this glorifying? What do I want to do really? You know,
Mm,
um, I think another way to do that is to look at your decision making process and say, hey, is what I'm choosing to do going to be for me or for the benefit of others or for God's glory? I think that's a practical step and looking to see how do I actually count the costs daily.
mm,
I think another thing is when it comes to big life issues, such as, as we mentioned earlier, career or romantic relationships or family or things like that, it's being willing to say, Lord, not what I want, but what you want. So I'm willing to lay down all of these things, surrender it to you,
mm.
right? And sometimes those are wrapped up in our hopes and dreams. If you hope to be married or your dream is for children or things like that, is being willing to say, God, I give this to you. So it's a daily trust, Willie, that, I'm going to choose to trust God today. So rather than acting in desperation or acting in fear as if God won't provide, I'm going to choose to trust him. And I think that's counting the cost, is saying, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. I think doing it my way would make it a lot easier. But I also know that, as we read in Luke, if I want to save my life, then I have to lose it. I have to give it to him.
Yeah.
And if I lose it, then I'll find it.
Uh, it's kind of challenging because there are some dreams that I have that are like realistic and dreams that I have that are very unrealistic. And it's way easier to like trust God with the unrealistic ones. Or it's like, God, I want like a 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom house with like a nice front yard and like a solid, nice, healthy dog, you know? And then I look at like, I go on Zillow or something and I'm scrolling through and I'm just like smiling, smiling on the outside, crying inside, just like,
It's,
why
it's,
God?
a, it's a hard time for the market right now. So give it some time. The
Yeah.
market changes.
And then, so it's
But
just like, all right, God, if it happens, it happens. If it happens, you're going to make it happen. But then there are other times where it's like, man, I really want to be like accepted in this friend group, or like, I really want to fit in with these people. And this is just like something that for me, like, if I know that people like don't like me, then like it really bugs me. And so there are times where I'm like, oh, like, help God, I need you to help me to put my own will to like do what I can to fit in with this group of people and like make them laugh and make them like me, and like stand for who you are and who you've called me to be. And so there are
yeah,
those moments of like those long obedience in that same direction.
yeah, yeah. And that sounds about right. To see all of that happen over time where you choose that direction, right? That obedience. And it's so important that you identify that kind of stuff. I think a lot of us fall into this area of, wanting people to like us or, wanting to feel successful or whatever that might be. And in that case, it's just saying, Jesus, how do I be true to you, you
Mm,
know, in this instance, while still just totally being, not just being myself, but being the me that you've made me to be, right? Fully confident, firm, and secure, not because of my accomplishments or because how smart or funny or intellectual or well read or whatever it is that I am, but rather because of what you said about me, you know? So counting the cost and following Christ a lot of times is saying, what am I willing to sacrifice? Now, it's not like Jesus is going to say, sacrifice every single thing and you can't have anything good ever. But rather it's, am I more important to you than those things?
yeah.
Yes, Lord. Okay, good. Come follow me. And it's amazing how God restores and fills back in the areas that we've sacrificed to him.
Mm,
But there's no guarantee for that.
mm-hmm.
So for every single person who says, oh God, I sacrifice, this idea of being married to you, your will be done. Many times God restores that into the way that he does, right? But it's not always guaranteed. I think the question is, am I willing to follow Jesus no matter the cost? And that's what counting the cost is all about.
Yeah, it's what Pastor Owen talks a lot about is God isn't transactional, where
Yeah.
we can feel like, okay, God, if I give this up, then like I better get this, you know. Um, but that's not how God works.
Yeah. As if we could work the system on God, right?
Yeah,
But
like
rather is God the most important thing, right? Yeah. It's
pull
like
the
we can
fast one on you.
outsmart the creator. Yeah.
um, Pastor Brandon, is there anything at Metro that Metro offers that can help us to have that long obedience to Jesus in the same direction? This is a completely unplanned question.
I don't know the answer to that, Willie. You fill in the blank here.
All right. I was trying to lob you the softball.
Okay,
Get a
go.
knock out of the park. I set up the T-ball for you. Hey, something that we do is a spiritual growth chart here at Metro.
Oh yeah.
Oh, see, it was right there. It was right there. The spiritual growth chart is these three areas. It's connect to God, connect to people, and connect people to God. And each one is broken down into three different areas. Sounds complicated. It's actually not. An exercise that Pastor Brandon has us on the staff, and he's done it at like some meetings with some of the volunteers at Metro before, is we take it and we rate ourselves on it. And like brutally honest, what I like to do is you can't use the number 7 because 7 is the cop out on a scale of 1 to 10. And so if you just eliminate scale of 1 to 10, can't use 7, it really like forces you to make a decision whether you're 6 or 8. But just go through it and see like, how am I doing on my devotional life? How am I doing in obedience to Christ? Like, how am I doing in joining the community and being part of the life of the church, and just taking like a real stock of your life? And then you can say, okay, I'm doing really good. I'm reading my Bible every day, but like, I just read the Bible and like, I don't pray at all, or I don't like worship, or I'm not connected anywhere. And doing that helps you to see, okay, here's the next step that I can take. Here's an area that I can work on. We also have things that you can serve in ministries, like youth ministry, as we've talked about a little earlier. But we have a bunch of different ministries, and then we have different things like connect groups, where there will be people that you can have these discussions where it's, I don't know what to do here, and you can pray for each other. You can talk things out. You can have that community that has your back throughout the difficult decisions that you need to make to look more like Jesus. How was that?
Totally true. I would have said all those things. Just wanted to give you a chance.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very humble of you.
I agree on connect groups for sure. Like, you need people around you as you're deliberating, what does it look like for me to follow Jesus? Is God asking me to give this up? And seeking wisdom is by people that are around you, that you trust, that know you, that love you. So many times in my life, connect groups, close friends in Christ have saved me from either holding on to something that I should be giving up, or not laying down my life to follow Christ.
Yeah. And it's I can't talk about connect groups in a high enough praise, just of the ability for true life change to come out of them. Just in those discussions, in those relationships that you build through months, years of just getting to know people, like just the ability for them to call you out on stuff and for you to call them out, and like just the life change that happens there is incredible. So
I totally agree.
A couple of announcements. One that we're really excited about is we've had a lot of people start attending Metro in the past year during the pandemic. And so if you're new, we want to get to meet you. We don't want you to just be kind of like just slip in, slip out. We want to get to know you. And we hope that you want to get to know us a little more too. And so we're doing something called the Red Dot event, which is like a You Are Here. And that's 2 Sundays from now, which is the
first weekend in March.
First weekend in March. If you go to our online or in-person services, after service, that you go out into that little alleyway. We're going to set up a little station where everyone can meet each other. You can meet the pastors, and it's going to be really fun. And if you're online, we have something planned for you. We're just working out all the details, but I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to be so good. Just in talking, I think it's one of the best things that we're probably going to do besides this podcast. Everyone loves the podcast.
We're really looking to connect with people, especially for our online family here at Metro. If you're not ready to come back to church, and that's okay, then we still want to make sure that we're connecting with you, especially if you're new. If you're not new, you've been here for a while, make sure you stay connected, whether it's a connect group or going through the Metro Minute questions with your family as you watch the sermons or afterward. So We're looking to make sure that we are still growing together, even though we're either in the church or outside of it. So there's so many ways to do that.
If you're not signed up for the Metro Minute, it's a weekly newsletter that goes out every Monday. It's got a little recap of the message, announcements, different things going on, and then it has the connect group questions and all of that. You can head to our website, metrochristianchurch.com, for more info, to sign up for the Metro Minute, to find a connect group. Everything you would need is there. Serving opportunities, spiritual growth chart. I'm there in like the sandal things. They're looking at the
Next
website
steps.
and you couldn't have picked a better picture for me, huh?
Oh yeah, that's the one. Encapsulates you perfectly.
Kind of does. Anyway, hey, we're so glad that you joined us. We'll see you next week on the weekend or on the Hana podcast. Aloha, everybody.
Woo!